One.
Hey, 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 I'm Kimberly Smith Austin. I want to welcome you back to another episode of the Made to Inspire podcast. I am here today with the awesome and amazing Misty Kerrigan. Hey, Misty.
Hey, Kimberly. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. We are here. We made it to a new day and also soon to be a new month in just like one day, huh?
A few days away. Absolutely. Well, I have some amazing news for you.
What's that?
The things that you've been doing since the 90s are the new trend.
What? And I always say there's nothing new under the sun, right?
Can
It
you
just
believe
circulates.
the work you were doing 20 some years ago is now what is the DEI, right? The diversity, the equity,
Equity.
and the inclusion
Yes.
is the hot topic. It's the trend, it's the push, it's the in some agencies, it's the mandatory training. But we were talking and you were mentioning that you were doing this in the 90s when it was kind of in the 90s revolved around it was about culture
Yes.
of the company, and
Mhm.
it just started to like expand, and now we get to today with 20 plus years. And it's got to be how is that for you? Is it kind of crazy or nice to be like, wow, I remember starting some of this before it was even named this.
Well, I think it's pretty cool that the world is catching on. And I say that catching on. But here's the truth, especially when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think it's always been a part of organizations or on the minds of some people. But unfortunately, it takes some racial tension or something to happen in our world to bring it back to the spotlight.
Ooh.
It's almost like I think about 2001, I started online professor. I was an adjunct online. And guess what? COVID happened and boom, now everyone's online doing the things that were out there in the past. So, again, I always say nothing new under the sun. It's just a matter of what's important, what matters, what people want to spotlight. And I think we're in that time in history once again where it's important.
I love that. And we're so funny. I know because we everything we do, we save in binders and we're able to like hit the garage and dust some of the stuff off. But the I think some of the most important part is really in the now in the 2000s, right? That sounds so funny even to say that. But it really is an expansion past if you're thinking about black and white and race. And absolutely it includes cultures and race, don't get me wrong, but I think it's intense now for the things that we didn't think about in the 90s as you guys were setting the foundation that we're now able to build off of really starting this topic off. And you know what, the diversity, the inclusion, and the equity, it's not just big organizations, it's not nonprofits, not just government. So what it is it's now seeping into small businesses and even with entrepreneurs, in the
Absolutely.
sense of don't get left behind. So whatever's happening in the corporate world, it's amazing just to be equal with them and not wait to catch up, because diversity, inclusion, and the I always get the E and the I
Equity.
flipped.
Equity. Yeah.
Equity is important even from right now, and it's hilarious, and I love it because I always do the talks in generation. These Generation Z and the alphas coming after them, they're not playing around on this.
Yeah.
Like, we started the trend, but these kids are walking out of high school. They're marching, they're doing the thing. So before it catches up to the business where you're canceled, the new thing, right? It's really looking in, and where do you start to sort of differentiate yourself out of the competition by starting here with really looking into the diversity,
Yeah.
inclusion, and equity.
Equity. That's right. I had the pleasure of facilitating and moderating a workshop this past week on, it was called Ready. And I always start with, are you ready? But it was race, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I think today, race isn't as big as a factor as it has been in years past, but we still have that race part. But
Mm.
now the real push is on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And as you were speaking, Misty, one thing came to mind. I remember being in graduate school and business school, if you will, back in the 90s. And one of the statistics that we had studied is that by 2025, the Hispanic culture would be the largest ethnic group in the marketplace. And I
Wow.
thought, no way. It was the 90s. And I grew up in Illinois. I was in school in Illinois, and we barely saw a lot of Hispanic culture. Now that has changed tremendously. And those statistics prove to be true, especially here in California. And so I think at that time, back in the 90s, we were talking about it, but not really thinking about how to implement those strategies into the business. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about how do you incorporate READY or DEI into your corporation to give you that extra advantage, that added advantage to diversify or differentiate yourself from every company on the marketplace.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And at the university level that you just give a nod to, a thing that hit us a couple of years ago was even in creating our marketing or our PowerPoints or our presentations, is really going back and looking at, is there an equal representation of people that we want to pull into the business? So
That's right.
on our marketing signs, like, is it a representative of all the cultures that we would include into our customer base, male, female? And I was just telling you that one of a major organization had to go back and look at theirs because they had a culture that they were lacking, which was the Asian culture. They realized that there was not a lot of representation in any of their marketing. And without even knowing it, it might have been losing them customers.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's interesting because when you look at the marketing that's happening today, I have found that many people say, you know what, I don't want to work with that organization because I don't see me present. And I'm not speaking me as in Kimberly, but that individual that's considering working with the company. If all the marketing material is Anglo-Saxon or Hispanic or African American, they're saying, wait a minute, is it inclusive? Is it for me? Is it diverse enough, or is it homogeneous where there's only one type of person in the organization? And I think in today's marketplace, we want to recognize the diversity of thought, the diversity of not only color, the diversity of education, the diversity of experience, because diversity isn't just about what I look like. It's about what's in my brain. My family origin, my experiences, my education has created me to be a different person than you, Misty. And as a result of that, we come to the table. Yeah, we may have some things alike. We're both female. Yeah, right. We're both minorities. Yeah. But what else? And I think that's where companies can either win or lose. They can win or lose when they think about, who do I want at my table to serve the marketplace that I'm looking to touch and reach out to. And that's where
oh my gosh,
diversity comes in.
Even when you think of the small things like a restaurant for diversity, right? I was talking to a friend today who's vegan, and I was telling him about you and how sometimes when we travel for our business that, we go to the craziest places and the food tastes almost like the food I would eat because it's vegetarian, get it? But we were laughing because the thing was, it's easier today to be a vegan than it probably was 20 years ago, because even restaurants that predominantly were focused on like meat or meat eaters, they started to have options, vegan options, a vegan burger that could have a better array of more customers being able to come and enjoy the restaurant. So when you think about it, it doesn't necessarily mean an overhaul of everything, but they're focusing on that inclusion of some things, even like in a restaurant, adding something like a Beyond Burger to be able to hit more people that they might not have been able to advertise to before.
That's a game changer. That's a game changer, because that means that anybody from anywhere can walk into their doors and get served. And I think that's, again, you can win or you can lose. When I go to restaurants today, even though they have an old school culture and they're like, this is who we are and this is what we serve, and there's absolutely nothing on the menu for me but a potato, it's disheartening. I'll be real honest with you. It's disheartening. I love French fries, if you don't know that already. I love them and I will certainly eat them, but my appetite, my lifestyle requires a little bit more. And so I tell companies when I'm sitting with them, regardless if you're a service-based company, a product-based company, whatever you are, look at how do you incorporate your organization or your process, your program, your products, so that it is inclusive for everyone. That it not only is inclusive, but there's some equity or equality in that process as well.
Ooh.
Because there's a lot.
Well, it comes to mind is because we've seen entire companies shift because of the inclusion. Like for instance, I love the Old Spice
Hmm.
used to be like old men, old white men, sailors, right? It used to have this connotation of it. And when
Right.
Old Spice started to shift, and even in their advertising, bring in different cultures and have like a different flair and bring that like funny, cool vibe, their company
Hmm.
exploded out again. And it was almost like a renaissance of that brand that was dying out and frankly losing customers because not a lot of men go out and buy their own stuff, right? Women usually are
Right.
the ones that buy the clones for the men, but it was funny to see a company like Old Spice start to shift and turn, and it was really through those three things of diversity, equity, and inclusion
There you
in
go.
their
You got it.
advertising and who they were kind of going after in the sense of who Old Spice was for,
Hmm.
expanding out of its old traditionalness. And that's
Yeah.
just an example of many companies. And you were talking about even in the 90s how you were going into huge organizations like MetLife and being able to sit down with them in the old boys culture, especially in the 90s, and really
Mhm.
help them expand into what that might look like for the next 5, 10, 20 years of where they want to see their business and where do they start in those baby steps of inclusion and that marketing outside of their norm.
Yeah. Because back then, and I just think about this even more, back then, they were one of the largest financial services companies in the world offering, financial products, annuities, that thing, but life insurance. And what we realized back then is that, okay, it's the old boys club, but there was no mixture of color or experience. And I was tasked back then with, from the recruiting standpoint, looking at what's needed, what's the process, how do we go find those people? And particularly, we were targeting African American, Asians, and Hispanics. And I was a part of that team where we built programs, processes to then go out and help us go recruit those folks. And when they came in from the recruitment side, built the sales training process so that when they went into their various markets, that it appealed. Because here's the truth:
Mm.
what appeals to an African American market may not be the same needs and wants or appeals for another market. So there was a lot of market research that we did to really bring that process to play. And then I think about late 90s, early 2000s, being a part of another consultant firm where we went in and did a merger acquisition with companies in DC, in Europe, and then here in San Francisco, in Illinois, saying, how do we bring these cultures together? Because now we're talking Europeans and Americans. And so there's so much work, the language, the lexicon and language lexicon being the same. What are we saying? Does this phrase resonate with this culture? Nope, we can't say that. So there's a lot of little things that we don't even think about. But I think when a company gets that hat on and they get conscious minded, they then say, okay, let me back up and see how can I attract and better serve the clients that are in-house.
God, I love that. Those are the two key words we want to focus on. We jump into our action steps. How do
Yes.
you attract and how do you better serve? That's key. That could be its own show. I love that you rephrased it that way because those are the two most important things you could do to increase referrals, retention, and loyalty.
Okay, that's right. So where do we go? What are those action steps when we look at a corporation and we want to get them on track? Because before we do that, Missy, let me pause for a second. We talked
Ooh.
about diversity, we talked a little bit about inclusion, but what about equity versus equality?
Oh, please take this one.
What about equity? Get you on the flow. Talk a little bit about that. When you think about those two
Man, so
concepts.
we've been doing this training across the state of California. It's called SOGI, and it is about the sexual orientation and gender identity and sexuality. And we're doing it because in the state of California, unlike any other state, foster youth have rights. They have rights to how they identify, and they have rights to who they get to date, which is crazy in this country when you see everything else going on outside of our country. Now, the crazy part is when we're looking at the two words equity versus equality, is
Mhm.
that what we originally were trying to do was create, and we didn't create this, it's something that had kind of, I think in the Philippines really started to charge it. Canada took some reins, and then
Okay.
we kind of caught on to it, was so that kids don't have to come out of, in the day we used to come out of the closet for some of our LGBTQ plus kids, is that what if there was an equality across the board where people just talked about their identification, how they identify, and how they express themselves, which is definitely separate to who they want to sleep with. But having equal conversations to the mix that everyone gets to talk about it as being heterosexual or as being bisexual, but it's just a conversation. So removing the equity is just adding that everyone gets to have the conversation and come to the table with the main ways they express themselves, identify, and then who do they love. And
Sure.
so that's what the things is, the equity in that is not having it where, and I always think of that sign that we show when we do the trainings, like it's the like, oh, if everyone's equal, what the
Right.
really means is, what if there was no barrier?
Right.
What if there was no barriers? Equality means there was no barriers, that everyone had the same conversation at the table. There didn't
Right.
need to be higher seats because people had started later or weren't as high as some of the other seats, and you had to like adjust. It really just is there. Equity for me means a little more is, how do we catch people up? Because it is that some people have started the race ahead. Some
Yeah.
people have started with way more resources. So when we're looking at that, how do we have people? You're a runner. How do we get people in a sort of fairness, being able to catch up to the competition so that we're all in the race without it feeling like no matter what you do, that person is going to be, or that group of individuals, or that culture or race or whatever that might be, is going to be so far ahead that there's never even a chance of catching up.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And just to give you a visual depiction of something like that when it comes to equality versus equity, and I think you said it so well, Misty. Equality is we all have the same opportunity, right? We all have the same opportunity. And let's visualize for a moment a fence, and there's a baseball field out there beyond that fence. And so we put three individuals there: a tall guy, a girl that's moderate height, and then a guy in a wheelchair. He's in a wheelchair. So right there, yes, they all have the same fence, the same baseball field. They can have the same site. But here's the challenge. When it comes to equity, that means we have to change some things. The guy who's tall, he's standing over the fence. He can see it, no problem. He can wave. The girl who's moderate size, maybe we give her 2 blocks so that she can see over that fence. And now we might think the guy in the wheelchair, what we do for him to make it equitable is we then give him a ramp.
Mm.
So now you've just changed the state. Yes, they have equal opportunity, but now they're equitable. There's equity there that each person can now see over that fence, enjoy that ball game, because now we've given them the equipment, the tools they needed to win. And that's what it's about. When we talk about an organization, whether you're looking at your current employees, maybe it's even your people that you want to attract that are not with your company. How do you make those adjustments? And then, when it comes to hiring and firing, there's a lot of different things that we have to look at when it comes to differentiating yourself and offering diversity in your workplace. So think about it: equity, equality, diversity, inclusion, so many opportunities there. And we don't want to
I love
inundate
that.
you with that, but we want to inspire and empower you with this information so that you can look at how to really take your business to the next level.
You nailed it. You absolutely nailed it. I think you should write that down, because you're going to have to add it to your trainings. Kimberly is a world trainer when it comes to this, and she's sought after. But what she just said was perfect: is she sees it as opportunities and not as limitations or things that have to be done. But coming into an organization, so people don't feel bad or don't feel shame or blame, or but the people before me or we did it, because you get stuck in that in a culture. But when you come in and you just come in with that exhale of, we have so much opportunities here to be better, where do we start? And just that word opportunities alone, it just brings another blanket than some of the conversations around this world. Because I'm not going to lie, I train this sometimes too, and people aren't always happy for this subject, unfortunately. It feels heavy, and then people get scared to have real conversations around, to have what's the C word? The not comfortable conversations, but like the critical conversations around this. And I know you've come into Oak Grove Center a few times and been able to deliver such powerful presentations, because we just start with realness. We start with conversations, critical conversations around what we're doing, courageous conversations around what we're thinking, and then taking out those barriers, and then really looking at, there might be some spaces and opportunities to add those ramps, if you will, real literally add really the ramps, and then like figuratively, what kind of ramps do we need in the culture? And that might even be the customers, the staff that's there, and the staff that you want in the future. So I think you really did a great job of nailing that.
Well, thank you, Misty. And I think that makes your company more attractive when you are hiring people. Who are you bringing on? Who are you attracting? And that's what we're talking about. Who do you attract in your organization? It's about how you look at things. And I love it because you made an excellent point about the opportunities. When we change our mindset from obstacles into opportunities, we're always going to put ourselves into a new position. And so think about that as you continue to evaluate your organization, whether you're an emerging leader, you're an executive, or you're an entrepreneur. What's that?
Entrepreneur. Like
Think about these opportunities that exist for you. They exist for you, not happening to you, but they exist for you. And so now is the time to really take advantage of that. Differentiate yourself. Get out there and do it.
So, and steps, number one is what you just nailed it, is assess. Like you have to just look inward, look at the company, look at the staff, look at yourself, have some of those meetings. You know, first some things is give out surveys. If it's just you, a survey would be weird, but really kind of just looking around and where are we serving right now? And maybe the question could be, who are we leaving out the way we serve right now?
That's right. That's so good. That's so good. So then you assess. And then the other thing, number two, I'll say, assess your competition. And I always like to say, we said assess, but benchmark. Look at what your competition is doing. Those companies that are similar in the marketplace, what are they doing? Are they serving a diverse market? And if not, guess what? That even gives you an opportunity to differentiate yourself even more. But maybe they are. What are their practices? I think there's nothing wrong with going out and looking, seeing what your competition is doing, because it gives you insight that you can use to level up. And that's what we're always looking at as a company. How do I level up? How do I take my business, my brand, and my bottom line to the next level?
And that's we're always talking about the leveling up with your competition. Could also be your collaborators. You know what? Maybe you're not ready right now to expand out in such diversity because you're doing the baby steps, but by knowing your competition or now collaborating with them is being able to integrity wise send people to them. Like, you know what, like this is an amazing organization. We're not where we want to be. We're working on it. But until then, this organization does an amazing job within this. And so really having that as you're going out and you're looking, and you might have some things they can't serve.
That's right.
And really looking at that, we always talk about we're looking at the diversity of the company, but we're also looking at 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, and where you're taking the company. And I think that's even more important than you are right now, and especially in today's time.
That's so good. That excites me because the last thing I think about is you thought about the company and your internal and external customer, internal being your employees, your external, those outside in the marketplace, but then adding that value to those individuals. Because I think, Misty, I love it that you really have spent some time focusing on the customer journey, the customer experience. And again, internal and external, now that you've assessed your business, assessed your competition, what is that experience going to look like for your organization? And Misty, will you talk a little bit more about that?
So the great point is, unfortunately, what we do as business owners sometimes, especially entrepreneurs, is we know we're our best customer. And we create the customer touch points off of what we think we want. The trouble is we're usually our best customer we were 5 years ago where we were. It's why we started the business now, because we're filling the gaps that weren't there 5 years ago when we started whatever that was. So the fun part is sometimes we disconnect from the original versions of ourselves that would be our best customer. And so what we do is we come in and we go through the journey of the customer through their needs, wants, and motivations. We have it in our book. You have millions of possibilities, taking your ideas from inspiration to monetization, because it's very important to not be in your brain, but to be in the brain of the customer and really see those touch points and where they're struggling, and maybe the touch points where they're excelling, what separates you from the competition, and maybe where the competition's better than you. And then you're going to be able to come in and just make those better once you get to be aware of them. And I'll give it a really simple, quick example would be when years ago when we started accessibility, because there was a lot of places that weren't available by wheelchair. Yeah. And so those rights came out, I think in the late 80s, probably the 90s too, when you were hitting all your companies, Kimberly, doing the work you did. But it was really just the simplest thing of, is this company accessible to those who are in wheelchairs? And they went out and you had to put the ramps in, you had to make sure that you could roll through the aisles and stuff. And so if you could do that figuratively in your company and looking at other diversity things of what's going on and how they are accessing your thing, even if your company is amazing online, there's still some generations that are never going to be online.
Correct.
Do you have a
Correct.
great phone system put in place? Because some people are still more comfortable on phones. So it's just those small touch points where we don't want you losing customers because your competition's ahead.
Yeah. I love that you brought up ADA, the American Disability Act and the wheelchair. And that's the thing we think about. How do we bring our company ahead of the curve? Because it was mandated, right? And even now there's some, mandates in terms of racial and sexual things that you can and cannot do in the organization. But be forethinking, think ahead, and maybe think about what you can do to differentiate yourself with diversity in your company. Because guess what? You can attract them, but you also can detract. You can send them away. You have everything it takes. And we believe in you. And I think you should too, by making some simple steps that will take you on to the next place. So again, those 3 steps: assess your business, benchmark your customers, benchmark your competition. And number 3, look at the value you bring, that customer journey, the experience. And with that, we are confident you will differentiate yourself in the marketplace. And with that, as we say every single week, there's something out there waiting for you.
Now go get it.